He noticed her at first glance. It wasn't the kind of infatuation that strikes the chest with sharp pain, nor the instinctive pull that drives one to reckless actions. It was something deeper, like a puzzle piece finally finding its place, a sense of recognition, though he was sure they had never met before. She sat at a table by the window, tracing the rim of her glass with her finger. Her gaze was directed somewhere beyond this evening, as if she was waiting for someone who wouldn't come, or knew that someone would come and feared it. He observed her for a while, the way she moved, slow and deliberate, the way her shoulders held tension, as if she had spent too many nights carrying invisible weight. He had seen that look before, in mirrors, in strangers who had lived too much in a too little time. He approached, reluctantly, unhurriedly, but confidently. A lonely evening? His voice was calm, steady, but she heard something more in it. She looked up, green eyes like a stormy sea, full of secrets and unspoken pain. "And yours?" She took a sip of wine, not breaking eye contact. "It just got more interesting." She smirked slightly. He already knew. This was a trap. She wasn't the type to simply let men into her life. She tested, examined, observed. "And what interests you?" Her voice dropped slightly, laced with challenge. "Why are you alone in a place like this?" He glanced at her glass. "And why does it seem like this isn't your first?" She laughed softly with a hint of bitterness. "Because people don't always leave when you let them go, and they don't always stay when you hold on to them." He didn't rush to answer. He knew she had said more than she intended. Outside, the city was alive. Cars passed, people laughed, the world continued spinning. But here at this table, it felt like time had slowed. "And what if I stay?" he asked finally. "Then you're either a fool or you crave pain." He leaned in closer, so close he could feel her breath on his skin. "And what if I crave you?" She held his gaze longer than she should have. Then she set her glass aside as if admitting defeat. "Then it will hurt." They met at night. Not because they were hiding something, but because only at night could they be real. Daylight demanded explanations, definitions, promises. The night only asked for truth. He listened to her stories, about explosions that left no scars on the body, but tore the soul apart. About fears that lived in silence, and memories that wouldn't let go even when you no longer wanted to remember. She listened to his silence. He spoke little, but every word he said weighed more than others' long monologues. He touched her as if afraid to break her, as if she were something fragile, though in reality, she could break him much faster. Some nights they spoke. Some nights they simply existed in the same space, allowing presence to be enough. They never spoke about tomorrow. Tomorrow was forbidden, but it came anyway. "You're leaving?" Her voice didn't waver, but her fingers gripped the edge of the blanket tighter. He looked at her longer than he should have. He didn't want to leave her, but the world didn't belong only to them. "I have to." She nodded, but this time, she couldn't hide how much it hurt. The city outside was waking up. The sounds of morning intruded, the distant hum of traffic, footsteps on pavement, a life that continued without them. He stood up slowly, as if giving her time to stop him. She didn't. He didn't say goodbye, because that would have been a lie. He knew he would return, but he didn't know if she would wait. Not immediately, not as soon as he wanted to. But life rarely cared about what people wanted. Weeks passed, then months. And though he told himself that he would see her again, there were moments when he doubted if she had been real at all. If that night, those nights, had only been a fever dream, something fleeting, something the world had no place for in the daylight. But then he was back. Same city, same streets, the same place where he had first seen her, though now it felt different. She wasn't at the table by the window this time. He ordered a drink, even though he didn't really want one. Just needed an excuse to stay, to watch, to wait. And then she was there, not in the way he had imagined, not in some grand, fated moment. She simply walked in, like any other person. Her coat slightly too big, her hair tied back loosely, a few strands falling over her face. For a second, she didn't see him. Then her eyes met his, and the world for just a second stopped turning. She didn't look surprised. No sharp intake of breath, no dramatic pause. Instead, she approached slowly, stopping just short of touching distance. "You came back." Her voice was unreadable. "I told you I would." She exhaled through her nose, the ghost of a smile playing at her lips. "A lot of people say things they don't mean." "I don't." A beat of silence stretched between them. The bar around them was noisy, but it felt like they were in their own space, just as before. She studied him the way she had that first night, as if trying to decide whether he was real or just another illusion. Then she sat down. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. They fell into old rhythms easily, talking without always needing words. But something had changed, not in an obvious way, but in the small things. The way she glanced away more often, the way she sometimes hesitated before answering. One evening, as they walked through empty streets, he finally asked, "Did you think I wouldn't come back?" She gave a small shrug. "I stopped waiting a long time ago." It wasn't meant to hurt him, but it did. And yet she was here. They didn't talk about what they were or where this was going, maybe because they both knew the answer. One night she told him about the time she had almost left the city. Bags packed, apartment keys handed over, plane ticket in hand, and then she had stayed. "Why?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe because I was afraid that leaving wouldn't change anything." He understood that more than he wanted to. That night, he stayed longer than usual. Long enough to hear her breathing even out as she drifted into sleep. Long enough to realize that, despite everything, despite the distance and the silence and the time, he was still here. And for now, that was enough.